need that we buy each other, and for whatever reason I don't know. Anyway, but we talk about, well, how much do we need to spend on that person, and how much do we... nobody cares. All right? Nobody cares. But what's been on our minds lately is money. Money, money, money. So I suppose selfish purposes, I wanted to look at this passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. And this is a passage where Paul is writing to the church at Corinth. And before he addresses them in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, he gives this example about the church in Macedonia, or the churches, the congregations in Macedonia. So 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 1 through 5, that's going to serve as our basis for the text for our lesson this morning or this evening as we think about money. And we're going to look at how the church at Macedonia viewed money. Now, these churches, I'm sure you're familiar with. If not, this is the churches, the congregations of Thessalonica, of Philippi, and probably Berea as well. So keep that in the back of your minds, and we'll go back and reference that a little bit later. But keep that in the back of your minds as we're reading the first 5 verses of 2 Corinthians chapter 8. We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. For they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means, of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. And this not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us. What a powerful passage about what it means to give, about what it means to give to God and give to others, to give monetarily. And that's what we're looking at here in this passage. I want to point out in the first couple of verses what appears first. It's their generosity. And as we look at their generosity in verses 1 and 2, I want to bring to the forefront some of these adjectives. It's describing what they're going through, adverbs maybe, in this life. Look at this in verses 1 and 2. Let's read that again. And look at their generosity. We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity. So we see their generosity here first and foremost, but look at what produces this generosity. Look at what motivates this generosity. And it's kind of incredible because he says first it is a severe test of affliction. A severe test of affliction. Now this word, perhaps poorly translated, but it does give us the proper meaning of what we're talking about here. Because the word is much, many, translated most often as much or many. But it's this idea of quantity. The quantity. They have so many afflictions. They have so many tests. A severe, many tests of affliction. And you think about this Macedonian call that Paul answered in Acts chapter 16 and 17. And I'm going to flip over there real quick and read some of the things that we see here. In Acts chapter 16, you remember Paul and Silas, they're thrown in prison for casting a demon out of this little girl, right? They're thrown in prison. That's Philippi. Well, that's not good. They leave Philippi uncondemned with an apology from the politicians because they are actually Roman citizens. So they apologized publicly. So they moved from there, and they're urged to go on to Thessalonica. Now, when they had passed through Amphipolis, this is 17 verse 1, Acts chapter 17 verse 1. Now when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of the Jews. And Paul went in, as was his custom, on 3 Sabbath days, and he reasoned with them from the Scriptures, explaining and proving that it was necessary for Christ to suffer and then rise from the dead, saying, "This Jesus, whom I proclaim to you, is the Christ." And some of them were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a great many of the devout Greeks, and not a few of the leading women. All right, things are going great. He is here for 3 weeks, reasoning and preaching for 3 weeks on the Sabbath with all these who at that point in time they were Jews, and now he is talking to them about Jesus. He is the Messiah. He's the one that you've been waiting for. So it's going great. But the Jews, who were still Jews, and this is verse 5, but the Jews were jealous, and taking some wicked men of rabble, they formed a mob, set the city in an uproar, and attacked the house of Jason, seeking to bring them out to the crowd. Because these people were following Jesus rather than following these Jewish religious leaders, they set the city in an uproar. They brought in some men of rabble, and they caused this mob. Doesn't that sound a whole lot like what they did to Jesus? And then they set the city in an uproar. We continue. They bring Jesus out, or Jason out, and the accusation in verse 6, these men who have turned the world upside down have come here also. Undoubtedly, they heard what happened at Philippi. These men who have turned the world upside down, this is in Thessalonica, have come here also. And the people, this is verse 8, and the people and the city authorities were disturbed when they heard these things. And when they had taken money as security from Jason and the rest, they let them go. The brothers immediately sent Paul and Silas away by night to Berea. So they are ushered out of Philippi after suffering in prison. Then they come to Thessalonica, and they're preaching in Thessalonica, and the accusation is these men have turned the world upside down. And they exit at night, undoubtedly because of fear, to Berea. So they arrive in Berea. And these people, in verse 11, now these Jews were more noble than those in Thessalonica. They received the word with all eagerness, examining the Scriptures daily to see if these things were so. Undoubtedly, much persecution. An incredible load of persecution as the church in Macedonia was beginning to get established. They went through a lot. So this is the severe test of affliction. But continue reading in verse 2. For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy. How many of you are happy when you are going through persecution? How many of you are excited and rejoice? I'm able to suffer. Their abundance of joy. Out of their abundance of joy, in a severe test of affliction, how it opens, and their abundance of joy. That reminds me of this word abundance. Literally it's overflowing, a surplus. They have so much joy, more than enough for one person, right? So it is overflowing, a surplus, an abundance of joy. It reminds me of the word picture that Jesus gave concerning the blessings that God gives us. In Luke chapter 6 and verse 38, you remember what he says there? Let's go ahead and turn over there very quickly. And this is the word picture that at least comes to my mind as I'm thinking about this abundance of joy. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. This is the idea of abundance, and this is what Jesus paints here. It's a good measure, all right? I mean, that's enough, But it's like, ladies, men, it's like you're cooking with brown sugar. You get some, and then you pack it down. That's what my mom has always said. You pack it down, right? It's a good measure, pressed down, look at it, shaken together, get all the air out, running over. Not just that. And then it's put into your lap, all right? That's how our children eat. Anything extra, our lap catches. Right? So the abundance here, it's an abundance of joy. And this is a beautiful picture of what it means to have an abundance. They have so much joy that it is overflowing. An abundance, a surplus. They have more than enough joy because of their severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy, and their extreme poverty. Extreme poverty. This word is the same word that's used in Luke chapter 5 and verse 4. Jesus is talking to Peter and Andrew. Hey, have y'all caught any fish? No, we've been fishing all night and we haven't caught a single fish. You remember the story. And Jesus calls out and he says, put out into, this is what Luke says in verse 4, put out into the deep. Same word. Put out into the deep. Well, they put out into the deep just a little bit further, and their boats overflow. Deep. Same word used here. They're deep. Not a superficial, but they're deep, extreme poverty. It's not something that is temporary. It's not something that is fleeting. It is a deep-seated poverty out of their extreme poverty. Now, you put these together in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty, their deep poverty. Look at the result here. Look at what's happened. You put these three together, and what do you have? The result is have overflowed in a wealth of generosity. What? I don't know about you, but this doesn't make sense to me. Out of their extreme poverty, their abundance of joy, and a severe test of affliction, the result is it has overflowed in wealth and generosity. They're poor, they're broke, they don't have anything, but what is the result? It's an overflow of wealth and generosity. I mean, this would be the limit, right? I mean, if you gave this much, that would be great. But it's an overflow. It's, again, a surplus. It's more than enough, more than expected. How great. How great an example of dealing with money and dealing with adverse situations, dealing with difficult circumstances. The result is overflow in wealth and generosity. Wow. A church born, congregations born in adversity, born into poverty, and they are giving until it absolutely hurts. We see there in verses 1 and 2, we see their generosity. Unbelievable. But look at their giving in 3 through 5, and this is going to be our last point. For they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. And this not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us. I just want to move through some of these and again kind of break this down and hopefully give it a richer, deeper meaning for us. Look at how they gave. The first thing that they says is that they gave according to their means. They gave accordingly. So you're blessed with this, and because of this blessing that you have, you give this, okay? Now, if you're blessed with this, you give this. They gave according to their means. Now, Jesus gives this parable in Luke chapter 12 and verse 48. At the end of it, he gives a point, a lesson. But the parable is about this manager of his master's house. And this particular manager, after his master left him in charge, he treated his other servants, his peers, very poorly. He mistreated them, he beat them, and he did very horrible things to them. And at the end of that, one of the things that Jesus says in Luke chapter 12 and verse 48, he says, "But the one who did not know and did what deserved a beating will receive a light beating." And this is it. "Everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required. And from him to whom they entrusted much, they will demand the more." Now, obviously, he's talking about this manager who was put in charge. But I think this principle applies to nearly every aspect of life. With great power comes great responsibility. To the one who has been given much, much will be required. If you are blessed with an abundance, guess what? Give abundantly. If you are blessed with little, guess what? Give little. They gave accordingly. They gave according to their blessings. That's the first thing that we see. They gave accordingly. But they gave, if we continue reading, for they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means. They gave beyond their means. Isn't that powerful? Out of their extreme poverty, they gave beyond their means. They gave more than enough. Jesus was sitting and watching people put money into what we might call the collection plate, maybe a box or something. And many people, wealthy people, came and they put in a surplus. But you remember in Mark chapter 12, there was this little lady, a widow. And she came and she put in what would probably be the equivalent in today's money of about 40 minutes worth of labor. Whatever the average labor is per hour, she might put in $5, okay? This little widow lady came in and she put in what Jesus said, more than all the others. Why? Jesus says they gave out of their abundance, but she gave, remember, out of her poverty. She gave all that she had to live on. Which one gives more? The one that gives beyond their means, not the one that gives out of their surplus. They gave according to their means, and he says beyond their means, as I can testify. And we also see that they gave on their own accord. It wasn't under compulsion. It wasn't something that Paul forced them to do. It wasn't something that Paul told them, you have to do this. They gave on their own accord. And if we flip over, and this is a passage we'll probably look at next week, heads up, chapter 9, you look at verse 7. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. They gave on their own accord. They gave willingly, not reluctantly, not under compulsion. They gave on their own accord. And this, to me, this next one is in my humble opinion, one of the most powerful and one of the most poignant in my life, the one that hurts the most. For they gave according to their means, verse 3, as I can testify, and beyond their means, of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. Now, apparently there was some collection that was going on for this severe famine that had hit Jerusalem, and they were wanting to send money in aid in that particular relief. They were begging. They were begging them. When's the last time that you begged someone to give? No. Please let me give you something. When's the last time you did that? No, please, I want to. My confession to you is I'm a little squeaky when I walk, if you know what I mean. Tight. It's something I struggle with. I can't remember the last time that I begged somebody, let me help you. Now, of course, people that I feel indebted to, absolutely. But someone who can never repay me, someone that could never. When's the last time? They were begging, literally pleading. The word there, parakletos. They were pleading. They were pleading with Paul and Barnabas, begging them, please let us help. Begging us earnestly for the favor, for the grace, for the chance. Ooh. Ooh. I don't know about you, but getting a little hot in here. When's the last time that you thought about giving as a favor, something that we get to do, something that we are able and we're blessed? It's a gift to be able to give. Do we ever think about it like that? Most of the time, a favor is something that is done to us, right? But this time it's something that we get to do, right? It's a blessing. They were begging for the chance to participate in this particular favor, in giving in this collection. So they gave accordingly. They gave beyond what was expected. They gave on their own accord, not under compulsion. And they were begging to give. And if there is nothing else that you take away from this particular lesson, take away this from verse 5. And this not as we expected, begging, not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord and then by the will of God to us. They gave themselves first to the Lord, God first. They gave themselves first to God and then to us. You want to solve all of your giving problems, all of the squeakiness? God first. Don't worry about yourself. Give yourself first to God. Then God's going to take care of the rest. They gave themselves first to God, and then by the will of the Lord to us. I believe that with all my heart that they fulfilled what Paul writes in Galatians chapter 6 and in verse 10. And this is one of my all-time favorite passages in Galatians. It says this, "So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, especially those who are the household of faith." Let us do good to everyone. Especially, I think they fulfilled that. Probably most of them had never met the Christians in Jerusalem. I think there's a decent chance that they had never met them. But they were begging to help them because they gave themselves first to God. But they also gave themselves to Paul and Silas and those who were traveling with him. Doesn't this remind you? Just a sheer echo of the greatest commands. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love God. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love God, love your neighbor. They gave themselves first to the Lord, loving God, and then they gave themselves to us also, love your neighbor. This is how we ought to give. Their generosity and their giving. They gave in their generosity through a severe test, their abundance of joy in extreme poverty, yet they demonstrated generosity. They gave themselves first to God and then to the brothers and sisters who were around them. Beyond their means, according to their will, beyond their ability. What an example of how we can use money. But the key, again, if you don't take anything else out of this lesson, the key as we think about the Macedonian money is to give yourself first to God. That's it. Then God's going to take care of the rest. If your life isn't given to God, you're on the wrong side of the fence. You need the grace of God. We all need the grace of God. If you are living without the grace of God, I propose you are living without hope. If you need hope restored in your life, if you need to be baptized and have your sins washed away, now's the time to do it as we stand.